The sky was clear when the first anomaly appeared. It was nothing more than a faint flicker. At first, no one took it seriously, just another blip on a radar screen or a trick of the light. But then came more flashes, bright and unsettling, cutting through the darkness, like the gleam of a blade in the night. The satellites above detected something huge entering Earth's orbit, but no one could explain it. The air was filled with static confusion, spread through every corner of the globe, from Washington to Beijing to Cape Town. World leaders tried to downplay the situation. At first, no one knew how to react, but that changed within hours. At exactly 3:12 a.m. local time, the first alien vessel breached Earth's atmosphere. It was massive, a towering structure of metal and energy, unlike anything human technology had ever conceived. Within seconds, the alien craft launched a series of devastating blasts that rained down on major cities: New York, London, Paris, and Tokyo. The explosions shook the Earth, sending shockwaves through buildings and people alike. Humanity's greatest achievements reduced to rubble in a matter of minutes. Panic spread like wildfire. People ran for shelter only to realize there was nowhere safe, nowhere untouched by the alien onslaught. The skies above were filled with strange ships circling like vultures. Their presence overwhelming the planet seemed too small to contain their terror. Reports flooded in describing the aliens as cold and methodical. Their technology advanced beyond anything humans had ever imagined. Weapons that could disintegrate entire blocks of buildings in seconds, laser-like beams of energy that cut through the strongest defenses humanity had in place. Captain Alexander Kane, a former military officer, now living in relative peace with his family, watched in horror as the first wave of destruction unfolded. He had left the army years ago, but the sight of his homeland under attack shook him to his core. The memories of his service came rushing back, the discipline, the training, the commitment to protect. But there was no time for sentiment now. Kane knew that the world had just changed forever. The civilization he had known was slipping away from his grasp. Within hours, humanity was plunged into a dark age. All communication systems were down. Governments tried to mobilize military forces, but the alien craft were too powerful, too fast. There were no safe zones, no place to hide. The streets were chaotic. People were terrified. They screamed, they cried, they fought for survival in the streets. As the world fell apart before their eyes, Kane stood with a small group of survivors, huddled together in an abandoned subway tunnel. They had been lucky enough to escape the initial wave, but it wouldn't be long before the aliens came looking for them too. As Kane watched the flickering lights of the tunnel above, he made a promise to himself. He wouldn't run, he wouldn't hide. If humanity had any chance of surviving this, it had to fight back, somehow, against all odds, against an enemy that seemed invincible. Kane knew one thing: the fight was far from over. This was just the beginning, and humanity would not go down without a fight. The world was in chaos. Nothing was as it once was. Cities were reduced to ruins, governments had collapsed, and survivors were scattered in small groups, hiding from the alien forces that seemed to rule everything. In the aftermath of the attack, the air was thick with dust, the streets empty save for the occasional sound of distant explosions or the hum of alien craft overhead. Humanity had never faced anything like this before. Its greatest cities, now nothing more than craters. Captain Kane and his group of survivors had found temporary refuge in an old military bunker deep in the mountains. They had learned quickly that survival meant using everything at their disposal, anything they could find, to fight back against the invaders. The walls of the bunker were lined with old weapons, food, and makeshift medical supplies. But it wasn't enough. Kane knew that to take the fight to the aliens, they would need more. They would need intelligence. They would need to understand how these invaders operated. The group moved in silence through the dark tunnels of the bunker, their footsteps echoing in the cold air. Kane led them at the front, his mind racing with ideas and plans. He knew that if humanity had any chance of reclaiming Earth, they had to find a way to take down the aliens one piece at a time. They couldn't face them head on, not yet, but there had to be weaknesses. There had to be something that they could exploit. As the days passed, Kane and his team worked tirelessly, scouring old military files and salvaged alien technology, looking for any clues that might give them an advantage. The team included specialists from every field: engineers, scientists, hackers. They all brought their knowledge together, hoping to uncover something that would turn the tide. They knew it wouldn't be easy, but they couldn't afford to waste time. One night, after hours of studying alien blueprints, one of the engineers, named Ellie, called out from across the room, her voice filled with a mix of excitement and disbelief. She had found something, a pattern hidden within the alien energy readings. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give them hope. The alien ships were all powered by a central core, an energy source located in the heart of their fleet. If they could find a way to disrupt that energy supply, it could cripple the invaders' forces. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was a start. Kane knew that this discovery was their best shot at striking back. It wouldn't be easy to infiltrate the alien base where this energy core was located, and it would take everything they had, but it was the only chance they had. They had to act quickly before the aliens regrouped and launched their next wave of attacks. The group immediately began making plans for a daring mission to infiltrate the alien facility deep within what remained of New York City. It was the heart of the invasion, and the alien forces had established a stronghold there. If they could get in and disrupt the core, it would send a message to the invaders that humanity was far from defeated. With little more than a rough plan and hope in their hearts, Kane gathered his team together around a table in the dim light of the bunker. They were ready. They had no idea what would happen once they set foot in the alien stronghold, but one thing was certain: they had to try. Humanity's future depended on it. The plan was risky. No one in the bunker believed it would be easy, but it was their only chance to strike back. The team had spent days preparing, and yet it felt like nothing more than a desperate gamble. Kane knew they couldn't afford to hesitate. Time was running out. They couldn't let the alien forces regroup and fortify their position, not after everything they had already lost. As the group moved toward New York, the sense of unease only grew. The city had been decimated. The towering skyscrapers that had once defined it now stood like hollowed-out skeletons, leaning precariously against the decimated skyline. The alien stronghold was located in the heart of the city at what was once the World Trade Center. It was surrounded by an impenetrable alien force field and guarded by countless drones and energy barriers. The journey to New York was not without its challenges. The group was forced to navigate through hostile territory, avoiding alien patrols and staying hidden from the ever-present drones above. They traveled mostly at night, moving quietly through the wreckage and ruins, but even the cover of darkness could not completely shield them from the constant threat of alien forces hunting for any remaining survivors. They found shelter in a dilapidated subway tunnel beneath the city and made camp there for the night. Kane paced back and forth, his mind racing over the next steps. They still had no idea what they would face when they'd finally reached the alien stronghold. The stakes had never been higher. If they failed, humanity's last hope would be extinguished. In the dim light of their campfire, Ellie, the engineer, leaned over a set of alien schematics she had been working on all night. Her face was tired, but her eyes shone with determination. She had been studying alien technology for weeks, and now it was starting to pay off. She had figured out how to bypass the alien shields of the stronghold. If they could infiltrate the perimeter, they could disrupt the force field long enough to give them access to the core. The others gathered around her, eagerly listening to the plan. The tension was palpable. Everyone understood the risks, but there was no turning back now. Kane looked at his team, his heart heavy with the weight of the responsibility they carried, but also filled with a strange sense of pride. They had come this far together, and they would fight together no matter what. The next morning they began their final approach to the stronghold, moving stealthily through the remains of the city. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and decay. The ground was littered with debris and twisted metal, but they pressed on, each step taking them closer to their goal. When they reached the outer perimeter of the alien stronghold, Kane gave the signal to move in. They used the stolen alien technology that Ellie had rigged to cloak themselves from the drone sight, and as they got closer, the alien shields began to hum with energy. The closer they got, the more intense the feeling of danger became. It was like they were walking straight into the heart of the storm. They reached the energy barrier, and Ellie worked quickly, plugging into the alien interface with a trembling hand. She activated the disruptor. They held their breath as the barrier flickered for a moment, and then collapsed. The way was clear. Kane led the charge into the heart of the stronghold. It was now or never. The stronghold was unlike anything they had ever seen. Its walls were made of a material that seemed to shimmer with a strange energy. It pulsed in time with the heartbeat of the facility itself. Every step they took echoed through the silence of the alien complex. The air was thick with an unfamiliar hum that made their skin tingle as they moved deeper into the heart of the structure. The alien technology was unlike anything human science had ever come close to understanding. Kane motioned for the group to stay quiet. Every sound could be their last, and he knew that time was running out. They couldn't afford to make any mistakes. The plan was simple: get inside, find the energy core, and destroy it. But nothing was simple when it came to the aliens. As they moved through the labyrinthine hallways of the stronghold, they encountered strange machines and glowing panels that seemed to watch their every move. They could feel the presence of the invaders all around them, though they had yet to see any in person. As they rounded a corner, they came face to face with a small alien patrol. They moved quickly, instinctively, and took them down without making a sound. It was a well-rehearsed maneuver. Each member of the team knew their role and executed it perfectly, but there was no time to linger. Kane signaled for them to keep moving. They had to push forward. The risk of getting caught was too high. As they neared the core chamber, the air grew heavier, the walls became more intricate, and the floor seemed to pulse with a strange energy. Kane could feel the tension rising in his chest. It was like the walls themselves were alive, watching them, waiting for them to make a mistake. They came to a large door that stood in their way. It was guarded by two massive alien drones, each one towering over them, with weapons that could vaporize a human in seconds. Kane knew they couldn't take them head-on without attracting more attention. The odds were against them, and yet there was no turning back now. Ellie, the engineer, stepped forward, her face set with determination. She had a plan. It was a long shot, but it was the only chance they had. She pulled out a device from her bag and began working quickly. Her fingers moved over the alien tech with precision as the rest of the team watched nervously. She had no time to explain, but Kane trusted her. He had to trust her. This was their moment. Moments later, Ellie activated the device, and the drones went silent. They fell to the ground in an unceremonious heap with a hiss of venting steam and the crackling of electrical circuits. The way was clear. Kane nodded in approval. They had done it. They had made it past the first obstacle. But they weren't out of danger yet. As they entered the core chamber, the walls seemed to close in around them. The energy in the room was overwhelming. The alien core was massive, a swirling mass of energy held in place by alien tech. They could feel its power radiating through the air. It was almost enough to take their breath away. Kane stepped forward, knowing that this was the final challenge. It was now or never. If they failed here, humanity's last hope would be gone. The core chamber was more than just a room. It felt like the very heart of the alien invasion. Everything about it radiated power. The walls were lined with strange glyphs and symbols that pulsed with an eerie glow. In the center of the room stood the massive core. It was a swirling vortex of energy that hummed with a deep, low frequency, as if it were alive. The air around it crackled with static. The force of its energy seemed to press down on them, making it hard to breathe. Kane could feel the weight of the moment settling on him. This was their chance. If they destroyed the core, humanity might just have a chance at surviving this invasion. The team spread out around the room, carefully scanning for any signs of danger. Every movement felt amplified in the silence. The only sounds were their breath and the hum of the alien energy filling the room. They had come this far, and now they had to finish it. Kane motioned for Ellie to move forward with the disruptor she had been working on for days. It was their best shot at disabling the core, but even then they weren't sure it would work. As Ellie moved toward the core, Kane noticed something. The walls were shifting. There was a strange ripple in the air, like the room itself was reacting to their presence. It was then that they heard it, a low rumble vibrating through the ground beneath them. The door on the far side of the room slid open, and figures stepped out. Tall and imposing, their skin was a deep metallic blue. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and their movements were fluid, like they were part of the very machinery around them. The aliens were here. The team reacted instinctively, weapons raised ready to fight, But Kane knew that they didn't have time for a drawn-out battle. They had to act fast. The aliens didn't move. They stood at the far end of the room watching as if they were waiting for something. Kane's mind raced. He couldn't waste any more time. They had to destroy the core now, or everything they had fought for would be lost. Kane gave the signal and Ellie ran toward the core with the disruptor in hand. The aliens didn't move. They just watched as she worked quickly to attach the device to the energy source. It was a tense few moments, but finally Ellie stepped back and activated the disruptor. The room seemed to shake as the core's energy fluctuated. For a moment it looked like nothing was happening, but then the entire room lit up with a blinding flash. The core flickered and then began to implode. The force of it was immense. The aliens finally moved, rushing toward the team, but it was too late. The core began to destabilize. With a loud crackle, the energy inside it ruptured, sending shockwaves through the room. The walls buckled and cracked as the aliens shouted in anger and frustration. Kane could barely hear anything over the deafening noise, but he knew they had done it. The core was gone, and with it the alien control over their invasion. But the victory was short-lived. The alien forces would not let them escape so easily. The room began to collapse around them. As the energy core detonated, the team turned to flee, knowing that the collapse would be their only chance to escape. They sprinted toward the exit, but the alien warriors were closing in fast. Kane pushed himself harder than ever before, his mind focused solely on getting his team out alive. If they didn't make it now, all of humanity's sacrifice would be in vain. The ground shook violently as the energy from the collapsing core sent waves of destruction through the alien stronghold. The team ran as fast as they could, but the tremors made it harder to keep their footing. The walls around them groaned under the pressure, and chunks of debris rained down from above. The alien warriors were right behind them, their footsteps pounding against the crumbling floor. Kane could hear their enraged shouts echoing through the chaos, but he couldn't look back. There was no time for hesitation. They reached the entrance to the stronghold, but the path out was blocked by falling debris. The exit was partially buried under a mound of twisted metal and shattered concrete. Kane's heart raced as he scanned the area for another way out. The rumbling of the collapsing stronghold grew louder and more intense. The ground beneath them threatened to give way at any moment. Ellie, who had been leading the group, slowed and looked around frantically. She was the first to spot it, a small maintenance tunnel just ahead. It was barely large enough to fit a person, but it was their only hope. Kane nodded at her, and without a word the team made a beeline for it. The aliens were closing in fast, but they couldn't afford to be slowed down now. As they crawled through the narrow tunnel, the air grew thinner. The smell of dust and burning metal filled their lungs, and the sound of the destruction above was deafening. The tunnel twisted and turned in strange directions, and it was all Kane could do to keep moving forward. He kept his head low and focused on the path ahead, trusting his team to follow in silence. They couldn't risk making noise, not now. They emerged into what seemed to be an underground storage area. It was cold and dark, but it was a brief moment of safety. Kane took a deep breath and glanced around. They had made it out of the worst of the collapse, but they were still deep inside the alien stronghold, and they were running out of time. They needed to find a way to communicate with the outside world, to warn the remaining human forces about the aliens' vulnerabilities, but their communication systems had been knocked out in the initial attack. It felt like they were fighting a war, with no one else on their side. Kane felt the weight of the situation settling on him. The fate of humanity was still uncertain, but he couldn't let doubt take hold now, not when they had come so far. Ellie was the first to break the silence. Her face was grim, but her eyes still held a spark of determination. "We can still make it out," she said, her voice steady. "We have a chance if we can get to the old subway lines. We might be able to reach the outskirts of the city and find some way to get a message through." Kane nodded and motioned for them to follow as they made their way toward the subway entrance. He couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope stir inside him. Maybe, just maybe, they had done something to turn the tide. Maybe humanity wasn't finished yet. The group moved cautiously through the darkened subway tunnels. The farther they went, the quieter it became, the eerie stillness making them all uneasy, but they kept moving. There was no turning back now. They had a chance to survive, a chance to fight on, and they would take it. The subway tunnels were dark, and silent their passageway, eerily empty as the group made their way through the debris-strewn corridors. Kane felt a sense of urgency that pushed him to move faster, his mind focused solely on getting to the surface, to send a signal to the rest of humanity. The walls around them were covered in grime and old markings, left by survivors who had passed through long before them. The tunnels felt like a forgotten world, one swallowed by the chaos above. With each step they took, the air grew colder, the feeling of isolation more intense. The only sound now was the echo of their footsteps reverberating through the vast emptiness. It was like they were walking through the belly of a dying beast. Even though they had left the heart of the alien stronghold, the sense of danger never fully left them. Kane knew that the aliens were still searching for them, and every second they stayed in the tunnels was one more second the invaders had to catch up. After what seemed like hours, they finally reached an old service entrance at the end of the tunnel. The rusted door was barely hanging on its hinges, but Kane managed to force it open with a quick tug behind him. The team gathered close as they stepped into the dimly lit alleyway outside the ruins of New York. Lay before them, smoke rose from the distant wreckage, and the once proud city was now a shadow of its former self. Kane knew they didn't have long to linger. They needed to find a way to send out a signal to the human forces on the outside world. If they could just get to a satellite uplink, or find a surviving communication tower, they could warn them about the alien weaknesses they had discovered. The problem was that they had no idea if any of the towers were still functioning, much less if they could access them without drawing attention from the aliens. The team moved quickly through the rubble, their eyes scanning for any sign of a working communications tower. The silence around them was unnerving, but Kane pushed the feeling aside. He couldn't afford to lose focus, not now, not when they were so close. They reached a nearby high-rise building. Its structure was battered but still standing amidst the destruction. Kane pointed toward it. It was their best shot at finding something that could help them communicate with the outside world. They began to climb the wrecked stairs, carefully making their way to the top, each floor more unstable than the last. But they kept moving forward, not willing to give up now. As they reached the rooftop, Kane's heart skipped a beat. There it was, a satellite dish, still intact, though barely hanging on by a thread. He moved quickly to assess the damage. It was a miracle that it hadn't been destroyed by the alien attacks, but it wasn't enough to just see it. They needed to make it work. Ellie was already at the controls, her fingers flying over the broken system, with a look of fierce determination on her face. The rest of the team stood watch, scanning the skies and the streets below for any sign of alien activity. The tension in the air was almost unbearable. It took several minutes, but finally Ellie's voice broke the silence. "I think I got it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The signal is going through. The message is out there." Kane felt a wave of relief wash over him, but he knew they weren't safe. Yet the hardest part was still ahead. The signal was sent out, but the weight of uncertainty still hung in the air. Kane stood on the rooftop, looking out over the ruined city. The alien ships still hovered above the skyline, like vultures circling their prey. They had no way of knowing if the message would reach its destination, or if humanity had even survived the attacks outside the city, but it was their last hope. Ellie turned to him, her face pale from exhaustion. "We did what we could," she said, "but we don't know how long we have before they figure out we're here." Kane nodded, knowing the truth. As well as she did, they couldn't afford to wait much longer. The aliens would be on them. Soon they had made it this far, but they wouldn't survive another confrontation, not without reinforcements. He glanced at the team, each of them worn and bruised, but still standing. There was a fire in their eyes, a refusal to give in no matter the odds. They were the last of humanity's resistance, and they would fight until the very end. The sound of approaching alien craft broke through the silence. Kane turned to see the sky above them fill with a swarm of ships, their forms blocking out the sun as they descended toward the city, their engines buzzing with the promise of destruction. The team had no choice but to prepare for battle. They didn't have the resources for a prolonged fight, but they had one thing the aliens didn't understand: they had human ingenuity and a will to survive. Kane rallied his team, quickly organizing them into defensive positions. He knew that they couldn't take down the alien ships, but they could slow them down. They could make them work for every inch of ground they gained. and maybe, just maybe, they could buy enough time for reinforcements to arrive. The first alien ship landed with a deafening roar, its massive doors opening to release a wave of alien soldiers. The team opened fire, their weapons echoing through the ruins of the city, but the aliens were relentless. They advanced quickly, their weapons tearing through the walls and debris. With ease, Kane gritted his teeth and signaled for his team to fall back. They had to regroup. They had to keep the aliens from getting too close to the satellite dish. They fought with everything they had, using the environment to their advantage, setting traps and ambushing the aliens as they advanced. Kane's heart raced as the battle raged on. The odds were stacked against them, but he refused to let them go down without a fight. Every shot, every move was a testament to humanity's determination to survive. The aliens grew more aggressive, the sky above filled with even more ships, their numbers overwhelming the remaining forces. But Kane saw something that gave him hope, a flicker of movement in the distance, a glint of light that wasn't from the alien ships. It was human ships approaching from the horizon. He knew in that moment that humanity was not finished. The reinforcements had arrived, the cavalry had come to their aid. The aliens hadn't counted on humanity's resilience. They hadn't counted on the will to fight back. With renewed strength, Kane rallied his team one final time. This was the last stand, but it wasn't the end, not yet. They fought harder now, pushing the aliens back. As the human ships closed in from all sides, the tide of battle began to turn, and the alien forces found themselves overwhelmed for the first time since the invasion began. The war wasn't over, but humanity had won the first victory. It had shown the invaders that they had underestimated the resilience of the human spirit. They had underestimated what it meant to be human.